Just moments before they took their shot over Lake Huron, U.S. fighter jet pilots said over cockpit audio that they were perplexed by what they saw.
I can see like lines coming down below, but I can't see anything below it. Definitely smaller than a car.
That small size is making the recovery mission of the unidentified objects challenging. Ships and helicopters from the Canadian Coast Guard are combing Lake Huron, and in Yukon, the RCMP are searching a 3,000 square kilometer area, but in both cases, they might come up empty-handed.
Let's make sure we recover them if we can, because I think that's also a working assumption. There is a possibility that we won't be able to recover them given the remoteness, given the challenges, given the deterioration, etc.
But there was no challenge in recovering significant debris from the Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina. A balloon that the Americans are believed to have tracked all the way from an island off the south coast of China, across the Pacific to Guam, cruising over Hawaii, then drifting north up to Alaska.
It means the United States had absolutely no reason to question the fact that it was a Chinese surveillance balloon.
American officials insist the Chinese still had control of the balloon while it crossed over Canada and into the lower 48 states, information that would have been shared through NORAD.
They would be fully apprised of all of the information that was being gathered, the tracking, the whereabouts that would be shared with Canadian officials.
Subsequent tracking hasn't shown any similar objects in NORAD airspace.
I'm not aware of any additional objects that have been reported operating in the space in the last 48 hours.
Japan has now joined Canada and the U.S. in saying that Chinese spy balloons have entered into their territory, and that's led the Japanese military to say they'll change their rules to allow any future Chinese balloons to be shot down. Dawna?
Okay, Mackenzie Gray, thanks. And with me now is Scott Clancy, retired Major General with the Canadian Armed Forces and former Director of Operations at NORAD. Scott, can you help us understand this? If, as has been reported, U.S. intelligence watched the Chinese spy balloon as it launched near China's south coast and was monitoring it as it flew over Canada and the U.S., that suggests the U.S. is capable of having eyes on these high-altitude espionage balloons. How does that square with what we've heard about the difficulty of NORAD radar systems detecting them?
So I think that, especially with respect to the first balloon, it was very clear that those gaps that General Van Erck, the commander of NORAD, talked about and adjusting the filters had occurred before this high-level first Chinese balloon entered into NORAD airspace. So to me, it squares very well. I think it's also very telling that that same kind of information was not present for the follow-on 3 objects.
Sorry, what do you mean by the same information?
Well, so we did not get any information on the follow-on 3 objects. We don't know about their attribution or origins. And right now, the leading theory from the White House and the Pentagon is that these are of a commercial application. Not that I would speculate on that, but that there's a difference between the fact that the Americans knew about the first Chinese object versus the other 3, I think is telling.
I guess telling of what, though? That's what we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that it's about answering those questions. Where did these last 3 objects come from and what were they about? I think the recovery operations are going to be essential at trying to ascertain exactly where these last 3 objects came from. But I think what I'm trying to get at is that the first balloon, significant intelligence gathering capabilities and significant intelligence gathering attribution to China versus the other 3, which are still in question.
Scott, do you think that had someone in Montana not spotted that original balloon that was shot down, eventually shot down, that we in the public, in the media, would never have known about the possibility, about the reality of surveillance balloons being overhead?
That's a distinct possibility. There's a couple of things that need to be demystified a little bit about that. The Chinese launched that balloon. We know now that the Americans and by extension NORAD knew about that. But that means the Chinese knew. Once it came into NORAD airspace and we were tracking it, they didn't know that we detected it. And until that picture was taken in Montana, it's a bit of a cat and mouse game so that you do not tip your hat as to the capabilities of the detection systems that actually defend the continent. Now, the next question is, would it have just, if not discovered by a civilian, floated through? I think that would have been an interesting case. almost impossible to know whether or not they would have shot it down anyways and made it public, because there's some benefit to that in exposing the program, but also in demonstrating that China is not a straightforward actor. So no, it is definitely a possibility, Dawna.
All right. Scott Clancy, thank you so much for speaking with us.